Last time you guys saw that we had most of the stuff finished. We just didn't have it connected. So I'm going to show you what we have so far. I'm going to show you with this, and then I'll join in with the other player. So we have, oh, so we have this deck builder. So now we can scroll through all the decks available. We have 10 decks that we can make. They're all preset the same, and you can modify them. So we'll go to edit deck, and we have all the decks here and all the cards here that I own. And so I'll go to deck, let's say 10, and we can edit the name now. So we could say best deck, and it'll update here. And let's remove all these cards to make sure we know what we have. So we went over this last time. I don't have any new art, and it's really tempting at this point to just go crazy and add cards. Just understand that when I first introduced this, remember the first thing people usually do when they build decks is go crazy on the cards. Like that's the funnest part. And what happens is that let's add this one, Poseidon, Jason, Athena, Achilles, okay, all the A's. We'll add all the A's. And we'll have, what is that, 7 cards? Yeah, we'll just, so that way we can remember. We go back, there's the best deck. We'll go back again. Now we'll choose the best deck. We'll have George, that's my name. I'm gonna join the match. Remember what I said, one of the things that most people, the mistake is that they focus on the cards. And notice that I have not done any art. I try to minimize what I do. I just grabbed a picture of Goku and just put it there. Let's start. I'm gonna do a default deck on this one. What is the default deck 1, or let's do deck 2 just so you see that. Join. We'll go over all the code. Okay, so we're ready here, ready here. Okay, so we have editor and George. And you'll see that I have now the names of the deck. I have my deck 2 in here. It's just hard because I have best deck, and I have Hestia, Achilles, Jason, Ares, and Athena. So it's all the cards that we have. And so if I keep putting these on, Ares, Jason, Aphrodite, you won't see Zeus in here, right? Because Zeus is one of the cards that we don't. Let's see, Athena, Achilles, and they'll keep repeating, but they'll never Aphrodite's. It'll never be any other. So we have 7 cards in the deck, and that's all we do. So yeah, so the deck works, right? And I'm gonna show you how it's all set up. And I try to stress how important it is when you're a developer, especially if you're indie dev, that you need to focus on the task at hand, especially when you don't have much time. I'm doing this on the side, a few hours a week, just like whenever I have time. And I have to control myself because I could easily go to Midjourney and spend hours crafting out all these art assets for the images, the background, the effects, the name, so that they look cool, like Marvel Snap. And then I can go deep into that and spend hours, and it will look cool. And I think you guys will like it, but it's not the point, right? The point is to move forward with the task at hand, which is making sure that the deck is working. And so I have all these crappy assets. I have dev art, right? I don't make cool UI buttons because everything will just scope creep. And it's not that it's like, if I was doing this full time, I could probably do it better. Or you could probably, if this is your own game, you're in charge of the art. Regardless, you're gonna go in and make it better or make it how you want. For example, the UI layout. could be better. But right now, I'm focusing on the mechanics and showing you that if you focus on the mechanics, if something goes wrong, I can change it. And so this is like the very basic part of prototyping and just getting it out so we can test it. And don't worry about art. If I have to scrap this and change it, we can change it. So let's talk about how I went about doing this. Last time we needed the browser. So I started with the browser. I was like, okay, we need the browser to match the avatar just for now. I could do a save system where I hit choose this deck. Um, in Marvel Snap, what happens is you choose the deck as you're looking for opponents. So before you look for opponents, you have a deck loaded. This is a similar scenario. So I have this deck browser, which is identical to this avatar browser. We have the next button and the previous button. We have the title name, and that's all we're changing. Eventually, we'll add images to the decks, but it's just like I don't need it, right? Right now, I just need the display name so that we know what we're doing. We have the player data, so now the player data has a string for the deck name that it saves. And so when we have a default one always loaded here, so that we don't get any errors on the next when it loads. So if the player loads the game for the first time and doesn't touch the deck, it will have a preloaded deck from the beginning, so we don't get any errors. So the player can play without touching anything. So deck browser. So we have the deck browser, deck manager. This is where we save the deck. So let's go over that for now. So the deck manager had some changes. So the first thing we do, remember, we had the save and remove deck. So now anytime we save the deck, we alter this and we add it back. What we need to do in here is actually this keeps it there. So the good thing is that if we edit this deck, it will still be already added in there. So we just added this feature, this get deck by name. So this is how we save it in a way. We have all the decks preloaded, and when we edit the name, we can find it again because we updated this. So all we do is we change the deck name, save it. So if we look at the deck browser, the deck browser is the same thing as before. We go through all of them. And in here, when we set the initial deck, this is the only thing I had to change from ChatGPT is that I needed to make sure that when we initialize the deck, that we also save it in the player by default. That way, when we start the game, we always have a deck loaded. So if the player doesn't change the deck and just wants to play, they play, and there's no errors. This is exactly like the browser. It updates the display name. In here, every time you hit next or previous, it will update this display and it will update the player deck name. We just need the deck name because again, that's how we're gonna find the deck. So when we go, this is the last thing I did. If we go back to the player, local player control. So this is in the game. Once the game starts, now instead of loading this by hand, because this was loaded by hand before, I'll show you. We go in here. We had this here preloaded. So before we had a chosen deck. Remember, we had this chosen deck that we used. Now I don't need that. It just loads automatically. So I left it on so that I could test this. And I can show you. Let's go into loading. Don't save. So if we go in here, because this will load before I even start the game. So I'll do deck 10, whatever. It doesn't matter. And then I join, it will load the deck before the other player even starts. So if we go here, player UI at the start, see, it already has deck 10 in there. So this happens when the game starts, before the game starts, because this is the function that calls it. So until the other player shows up, the game hasn't started. So this is a good way, and we could do it on awake too, but they have to ready up too. So this will always happen. Like even if the player clicks really fast on ready up, this will already have happened. So we load the deck, we set the names. So we use that UI just so that I know that it's correct. So it's a just a debugging step. Eventually, we can set the image we want to. I know Pokemon TCG has the where you can edit the sleeves on the cards and the sleeve on the deck. So then you can do that. And you also have the display map that changes based on whose turn it is. So you can edit the display map. So all these things can happen. You can save it on the player data and then load it on the game. Um, so super beneficial scriptable objects, right? I don't have to uh, create a game object that stays within the scenes. I just have a scriptable object instead of creating a script that doesn't get destroyed on loaded. It's nice and handy to do that. So that's why I like scriptable objects for that reason. They're just more convenient to use for data that only needs to persist for that game for this session. Then let's go deeper into the actual deck builder. So what we did is the other thing I created is the scene transition because I didn't have that yet. So if we go into loading, I added edit deck button now I have a universal loader. I want to show you that. This is instead of again, if you want a more robust scene loader, you can create a manager, scene loader manager that's singleton if you want, and it can have the loading effects and all that, and it makes it easier to create the same scene transition for all scene transitions. So it has a fader, a fade in, fade out, and all those cool things. But for the purpose of this setup, we don't need anything fancy. So all I need is a scene loader that will take a string and it'll just load that scene. Because that's all I need. I've seen so many cool scene things because oftentimes people misspell scenes, and so you always want to have a reference. And so oftentimes you have the index or you have other things that you load. Honestly, no matter scene loading gets really complicated, even no matter how good the system you make is, there's always something that the developers or the game designers have to do that will make it tedious. And so I just like to keep it simple. So all I have in here is the scene name, and it's the same as this one. And if it doesn't match, then whoever put it needs to make sure they spell it right. That's all. There's no tutorial that I have to tell them on what they need to do. It's pretty straightforward. You make a button, you use that script, you load the right string. And then if we go into the deck builder, we have a back button here, and it's the same thing. We go back, it's a string. Pretty straightforward. We use the same script, we use the same mechanic, it's just a string. It either matches or it doesn't. So if someone changes in here the scene name, then it won't load anymore, which is a bummer. But I've seen developers try to create all these tools to make scene loading easier so that even if someone edits this, it will still reflect to the same instance. And some tools are nice, um, but in the end, then you have to create tutorials or documentation to tell people how to add new scenes, and that in itself is tedious, and it gets complicated. So in the end, it just changes where the pain point is. It doesn't really get rid of it. So we have that, and then the deck, we created a deck view. So what we did, this is for the display name because we have everything working. The deck edits, adds, saves, but we didn't have a display. So I have this, oh, not that one, this one. And it's again, I could make it better art. I could do a overlay so it covers the rest of the game so that you don't accidentally click on stuff. But for now, I just did this input, cancel and confirm. I have the functions in here. I'll show you. Pretty straightforward. Um, and that's it. Like there's nothing else. I try to keep it very simple and straight to the point. One thing we did have to change in here, you know how when we created the available cards, we always have to destroy, so we update the current database. I did the same. I had to do the same thing for the deck selection. So when we go back to the deck selection, we have all the decks that are available. That name is displayed there, so we have to change it. So instead of grabbing the specific one and trying to keep track of which one I have, I just delete all of them and read it again, which is not optimal, but at the same time, it's okay. So if you want to save on performance, you could update these to only change the deck that was selected. That's very doable. But in here, so when we go back to selection, deck selection, I populate the deck. I added that. So that way we can delete all the decks that we need and get the right name. Now we have this select this region. I like regions because we can, I don't know if I mentioned it on a previous tutorial, but I just like separating things. And variables, you can put it at the top and use the Y reference, I believe. So you can use a header to change like what it's about. So that's a good way to change it if you want to have all the reference at the top. It's just these I'm not going to use anywhere else. So I'm okay leaving it in this region. So these are things I'm going to use for this specific functions of editing the deck. I open up the panel. This is all ChatGPT. Confirm the deck name change. Again, we save the deck, we edit, and this save deck could be done better. Like I said, we saw it. It's not really saving; it's adding if it's not there already. So if we added a plus button that created a new deck, this would work because it would take care of that. Because if it's not in the list, it will add it to the list. So it's a great way to create that functionality for the future. Deck name editing, and then we have either cancel. We save the old. Again, we have the old name in case we want to backtrack. So if we confirm the change, we actually save it. If not, we cancel it. And when we save the name, we change the text. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. Nothing too complicated. But again, like I said, I could have easily done the deck sleeves, the card sleeves, and then gone into the art because I still have that one art asset. Uh, we don't. I'm not gonna do that right now. I'm really excited for the next video. It might take me a bit to get it ready, but we're gonna do some amazing stuff with scriptable objects. We're gonna create event channels where we will race events and listen to events so we can get card effects working so that we can get all those nice when a card is spawned or when a card is destroyed and different events that we can listen for so that we don't have to find objects and try to tie them together as they're spawned and do crazy code. If you want to look into it yourself, there's a project name called Chop Chop that I'll link on the next video, but it's from Unity, and that's where they teach or share that project, which has these event listeners. So I'm going to share that tidbit because I think that's a very valuable information, and we're going to apply it to our game. So that's all on the next video.